All right, folks, so the air is a little bit crisper here. We have made it to September, and today I want to share with you my 3 tips for what to be doing over the course of September in order to absolutely maximize the last 1 to 2 months of the year. And at the end of this video, I'm also going to share with you one little bonus tip on one of my favorite upcoming crops here. Hey folks, it's Jordan from Mind and Soil here, where we're looking to introduce 1 million individuals to gardening's mental health benefits. So if one of the reasons why you love gardening is because of how it soothes you and restores you, then go ahead and subscribe and come grow with us. Now, speaking of that, before we even dive into our 3 tips for September, I wanted to invite you to spend a minute with me to just slow down and take a couple of deep breaths, and then we're going to dive into the 3 tips. So if you're up for that, go ahead and close your eyes and take a big deep breath in and out. And on the next one, squeeze your shoulders up to your ears and out, relaxing them. Another deep breath in and out, relaxing the shoulders, allowing yourself just to slow down for a couple seconds here. I encourage you just to take 1 or 2 more deep breaths on your own there. All right, well, let's get started with tip number 1, which is what I would call maximizing. And what I mean by this is simply maximizing the output from our flowering plants before the end of the season. And there's 2 ways that we can go about doing this. One is by introducing stress, and the other one is by topping. So let's first talk a little bit about stress. And I want to take you over to my pepper plants here. Now, all that this plant is trying to do is flower so that ultimately it grows fruit where it contains the seed, and then have that seed ultimately turn into the next generation of the plant so that it can live on. And so when a plant starts to feel stress, it basically notes inside that, hey, we have got to go to flower so that we can move our seed along to future generations. And so in an instance like this, where we know we're towards the end of our season, we can actually artificially introduce that stress to the plant. And for this pepper plant, what that would mean is turning off the water and the watering and the irrigation on it. So all that I'm going to do is go down to where the irrigation is, turn that off, and I'm going to give it 0 water for 5 to 7 days. And now with the plant not receiving any water, it's starting to think, shoot, we've got to make sure that our seed is passed along for those future generations. And so when we now look at this plant 5 to 7 days later, take a look, and as we can see, we've got all of these beautiful flowers that are now on it, that are set and starting to grow into beautiful small fruit. So that's one way that we could go about maximizing our harvest. Another way is with our vines, such as tomatoes, cucumbers, squashes, is that we can top them so that all of that foliage and new green growth is removed. Because any of that new green growth that would go on, the fruits that are going to establish on those, they're not going to have quite enough time or enough of a time window in order to really develop and then ripen into new tomatoes or squashes or cucumbers, etc. So let's take this tomato plant as an example. To top it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow the main stem, and I'm going to basically trace it to the very end of the plant. And then I'm going to come back 12 inches from the end of that main stem, and I'm simply going to take my pruners and just chop it right across the main stem there so that it is topped. And then the second thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to look for any suckers, and I'm going to remove those as well, because they would become the new main stem if it was topped, just as we did. And by removing all those suckers, there are not any new areas for new foliage and green growth to come out of. By doing these 2 things, all the energy is now being redirected into the tomatoes that are already on the plant, 1, to grow into fully mature fruit, and then 2, to ripen before the end of the season. So the first step here is all around maximizing by introducing new stress, as well as by topping some of our plants. So the second tip that I want to share with you today is all around extending the season. And so when we think about it, as we get into the fall, we're getting cooler weathers and we're getting more rain. And ultimately, this is what's going to kill off our plants. But if we build structures and put structures over top of our plants that helps keep them a little bit warmer and helps keep some of the rain out, then we are effectively keeping those prime growing conditions a little bit later on into the season. We're adding 2, 3, 4 weeks onto the season. And so let's think about, say, our peppers, which I was just talking about. And those fruit, they have just set on that pepper plant, so they still need a few weeks to get nice and ripe so that we can harvest them. And so what I'm going to do is take just some of the reclaimed wood that I have sitting around my property, and I'm gonna wrap some plastic around it, and I'm gonna put some hinges on the top of it. And then all that I'm going to do with this is essentially use it as a mini greenhouse and put it right over top of where those peppers are growing. And so by doing this, effectively what I'm doing is keeping that warm air in by creating that greenhouse of effect. And I'm also keeping some of that rain out, so they're not getting hit by that every single day as we get into late September and early October. And my hope is that that will help extend the season on them a little bit, allow some of those fruit to ripen up. Now let's take a smaller plant, say such as our basil, and all that you'd have to do in an instance like this is go to your local kind of big box store and grab one of the clear bins that they have, drill a whole bunch of holes into the top so that some air can get out, and then simply pop that over top. And it's going to have that exact same greenhouse type of effect where it's keeping water out and keeping warmth in to allow that plant to be in its ideal growing environment for a few more weeks or maybe even a month of the season here. And this is the exact same tactic that I use at the beginning of the season to help those months where it's April, May, and June feel more like it is in the middle of the summertime. And the plants, as we can tell by how well they've grown, absolutely love that. So the second tip there is all around extending the season through using different structures to put over top of some of our crops. So the third tip for today is to harvest any of the fruits or vegetables on your plants before the plant diseases get to them. The two primary plant diseases that I see kind of ending plants at this point in the season are powdery mildew and late season blight. So powdery mildew, if you haven't watched my video on it, go ahead and check that one out. But this is a white powdery fungus that's going to be sitting on your zucchinis, your cucumbers, your squashes, and it really travels all throughout the plant here. And so when we look at my spaghetti squash, which I featured in that previous video, you know, at that point, the powdery mildew, it hadn't completely taken over the plant, but as we can see here now, a few weeks later, it has fully decimated this plant. So much so that one of the spaghetti squash that was sitting on the back of the plant has actually fallen right off of the vine. It just did not have kind of the support that it needed any longer into the grass, and now it's getting eaten away on by ants. So I'm gonna have to put that one into the compost. So my encouragement for you, if you have powdery mildew on your plants, one, it's inevitable, and then two, as it gets to kind of 50 to 75% of your plant being covered in it, go ahead and just harvest everything off and then get that plant into your compost as it's kind of reached its point in the season where it's no longer going to be growing anything new. Now for late season blight, we're going to see this on our tomatoes, our potatoes, and potentially even our pepper plants. And so what you want to be looking for is both on the leaves and on the main stem, any kind of brown or dark patches that are showing up kind of in a sporadic or random fashion throughout the plant. And as you spot those, if you notice that first on the leaves, they're beginning to grow and take over more of that leaf and the whole thing is starting to turn brown, just cut that off straight away and don't even let it begin to spread to other parts of that leaf, and especially not into the main stem. Now, if you do see the black and brown spots in the main stem and you notice over the course of 1 or 2 days that it's expanding or growing, then just go ahead and at that point harvest all of the fruit off, because that late season blight is going to move through the main stem incredibly quickly. And as soon as it reaches the fruit and gets into the fruit, we have to basically put that fruit into the compost. So this is where you're gonna wanna keep a really close eye on your plants and see if that one, powdery mildew, has really started taking over, or two, that late season blight has made its way into the main stems and started to spread. And once again, if you notice that either of those are occurring, at that point in time, kind of just take the path of getting all the fruit off of the vine and go ahead and start preserving it. So if you get to the point where you have harvested everything off of the plants at some point in September here, and you then have a little bit of excess of it all at once, then it gets into how do I want to go about preserving it and ultimately storing it through the fall and winter months. And so there's a couple of different ways that you can go about doing this. For say your potatoes and your onions and your garlic, if you just keep those in a cool and dark area, then those are going to go ahead and stay really, really good for several months. For some of our herbs, such as say sage or oregano or thyme, you could cut those off of the plant and then hang them upside down to dry them, or even put them into a dehydrator. So drying is another way of going about it. And then say for our basil plants, what you could do is you could harvest all of those leaves off, and then you could blend all that up into a beautiful pesto. And then what I encourage you to do is use a ice cream scoop to put a little scoop onto a cookie sheet, pop that into the freezer, and then once you have it in the freezer and frozen, pop all of those little pesto pucks into a bag and enjoy them at any time over the course of the season. For say your cucumbers, you could go about pickling those and then either putting them in your fridge for storage of a couple of weeks to a month, or you could boil them, which is effectively canning them, and then they're gonna stay good for months and months on end. You could also go down the path of salting and fermenting. Those are a couple of other ways that you would be able to store and preserve your food for a longer period of time. So those are the 3 tips that I wanted to cover off on today. First is maximizing the harvest that we have through introducing a little bit of stress and by topping our plants. Second is extending the season by using different structures and covers to ensure that our plants are staying in a warmer and drier environment and not getting as affected by the rain and cold weather that's just around the corner. And third is to be harvesting all of the fruits off of our plants before any of the plant diseases get to them. Now I'm going to share my one bonus tip with you in just a second, but if you've gotten any value from this video, please go ahead and give us a like, because that really helps us get in front of new gardeners that may not have yet experienced gardening's mental health benefits, and we'd love to introduce them to it. All right, so that brings us to the one final bonus tip that I have for you, and that is what happens in 52 days from now on October 20th. Well, there is an old folklore or tale or myth that planting your garlic on the October full moon, which this year is October 20th, is the absolute best time to be doing so, to get big, beautiful heads of garlic. And so I would totally encourage you to do it. Whether it's true or not, we'll find out, but we are encouraging everybody to plant it on that day so that we can all be planting our garlic, regardless of where we are in the world, on the same day in October there. So I'd absolutely love for you to be a part of that with us planting garlic on October 20th. Now on top of that, I would also encourage you to buy your garlic and your amendments sometime here in September, opposed to late September or early October, because they always sell out. And so you're gonna have to figure out kind of which variety to be growing for the garlic front. But on the amendment front, what we do is we use compost, and then we use our worm castings plus superfood, which is our growth kit. And if you want to order that growth kit, we ship it all across Canada, and you can find the link to order that down in the description below. And over the course of September and October, we're going to be putting out all kinds of videos, live happy hours on how to utilize that growth kit with your garlic specifically. So we're really excited about October 20th and all things growing garlic. It's one of my absolute favorite crops. That's everything for today here, folks. I hope that this has helped you feel a little bit more comfortable and a little bit more confident as you navigate through September and the changing of the seasons. Go get those hands dirty once or twice more this season, and I can't wait to catch you on the next video. See you then.